On the morning of December 7th, 1941, United States Navy Captain Marvin Sharp Bennion was in the process of shaving and getting ready to leave his ship, the USS West Virginia, to attend Sunday school and fast meeting in Honolulu, when a sailor on watch from the bridge ran to his quarters to report a Japanese air attack approaching at hand. Captain Bennion immediately gave the order, "Japanese air attack, to your battle stations," and then ran to his own, the conning tower on the flag bridge, where he then verified the readiness of several gun crews. Just then, Japanese torpedo planes flew in close from the outside, letting go 3 torpedoes that struck the West Virginia in rapid succession. Tearing a great hole in the exposed side. Almost simultaneously, Japanese bombers flew overhead, barely clearing the masts, and hit the West Virginia. When the first wave of the attack was over, Marvin, anxious to see what had happened to his ship, stepped out the door and started to the flag bridge. He had only taken 2 steps when he was hit by a splinter from a bomb dropped off the battleship Tennessee, which was alongside the West Virginia. The splinter tore off the top of his stomach, and a fragment of it hit his spine and his left hip, and immediately lost the use of his legs. He collapsed onto the deck, got on his back, and with nerves of steel, put back his entrails that were actively spilling out the wound. Noticing his wounded captain, a pharmacist mate came to place a bandage over the abdomen and to try to ease the pain, though it was clear to him, and no doubt Marvin, that the wound was beyond any hope of mending and would be fatal. Once the wound was patched up, Marvin sent the men back to work with the wounded and refused to be attended any further while there was still work to be done. Marvin was courageous and cheerful to the last moments of consciousness. When the first attack was over, he allowed himself to be placed on a cot, and the cot was to be moved under a protective shelter on deck. There he remained during the second Japanese attack, which occurred an hour after the first one. He resisted all efforts to remove him from the bridge with a firmness that amazed the officers, who thought that they knew him very well, but did not realize how much force there lay beneath his gentle ways. He talked only of the ship and the men, and how the fight was going. His only expression of regret were the horrors of the treachery of the Japanese, and of concern because of the paralyzing loss of warships. Marvin had grown weaker from the conscious loss of blood. The officers tied him on a ladder, and twice tried to move him to a lower deck to get him away from the fire. The constant smoke and flames swept over the forward deck to make it impossible for the men to receive him. While being carried up the ladder to find another way to get their captain off the ship, Marvin had lost consciousness. But as soon as they laid him out flat on the bridge floor, the blood returned to his head, and he told them to leave him and save themselves, if that were possible. They made him as comfortable as they could, and leaving the pharmacist mate by his side, 2 officers spent the next half hour trying unsuccessfully to put out the fire. After they left their captain, the mate reported that Marvin had slumped over and breathed, "I'm gone." Marvin's immediate commander, Admiral Anderson, wrote to his widow, "He was an able officer and a fine gentleman, respected by all, a good example to his juniors. In his tragic but glorious death, mortally wounded in action on the bridge of a ship, he excelled himself. Felled and dying, he would not permit his removal, but continued at his post to the end, concerned with only fighting and saving his ship." In a subsequent letter, Admiral Anderson wrote, quote, "I should like to seize this occasion to express my admiration of Captain Bennion's devotion and heroic conduct at the attack of Pearl Harbor, where he made the supreme sacrifice." Marvin's executive officer, Commander H.R. Hillenkoetter, wrote, quote, "Be assured, Miss Bennion, that every person in the West Virginia shares your grief. We are all proud to have served under Captain Bennion, and his kindness, cheerfulness, and courage will always be remembered by all of us who had the privilege and pleasure of being under his command. Thus closed in glorious death a naval career without fault or blemish." The West Virginia, moored in shallowed water, sank at 2:30 p.m. following morning, when the superstructure of the ship had cooled off sufficiently to permit. Marvin's body was removed from the ship. The spot where he lay had been untouched by fire. Later, dressed in temple robes under the direction of President Ralph E. Woolley of the Oahu State, his body, along with many others who lost their lives at Pearl Harbor, was initially buried in the cemetery at Honolulu. The President of the United States posthumously awarded Mervyn the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions taken December 7th, 1941. Bunyan's triple combination, consisting of the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, and Pearls of the Great Price, sustained some damage, but did survive the awful events of December 7th, 1941. A memorial service was held for Captain Bunyan in Washington, D.C. on Sunday, February 15th, 1942. Later on, his body would be exhumed from his burial in Honolulu, and he would be reburied in the Salt Lake City Cemetery. He has 2 headstones. One, a modest marker saying his rank, branch, and his name. The second one, a white marble headstone which states Mervyn S. Bunyan, Medal of Honor, Captain, U.S. Navy, World War II.